Hello and welcome to Module 1 of the Curriculum Management course. In this module, we look at the curriculum cycle. Now, the curriculum cycle is exactly that. It is a cycle, and it's derived in order to monitor and evaluate a school's curriculum. It's an incredibly powerful tool because you can use this to check whether your teaching, learning, and assessment in the school is on track. And by this, we make sure that we are achieving our goals that we set, as well as we constantly improving what we're doing in the school, right down into in the classroom. Now let's have a look at what the curriculum cycle consists of. Well, firstly, there are 6 different steps or elements that make up this curriculum cycle. The first is what we call the goal or focus. Now, the goal or focus derives or comes from your vision and mission of the school, as well as from all sorts of other aspects of your school. But the key thing here is you want to use this to determine what you actually require in the school. What do you want to achieve? From there, we look at the planning stage. Now, the planning stage is, of course, looking at how do we plan for these goals that we have set. We need to make sure we develop the criteria and the conditions for the goals to be achievable. We need to get the necessary training and development of skills and knowledge to be able to achieve these goals. That might be from the leadership side to even down to the teachers. If you've got particular goals that you've set, you need to make sure that the teachers are able to actually achieve them. And we also need to plan for the best way to achieve these goals. The next step or stage is implementation. So once we have planned, we need to implement. And this is where we carry out the task and the process. While you're busy carrying out these tasks and processes in curriculum, you need to assess whether you are actually achieving what you set out to achieve. It's no point in waiting to the end of the term to discover whether the learners have achieved their results or the targets that you're setting or not. We need to make sure that constantly we're doing this. So during implementation, we must make sure we've got a lot of informal assessment carrying out in the classroom, as well as a lot of reflection in the school. We need to make sure that we're using dynamic and different methods of doing things. We don't want to get bored or get the learners bored or be boring. If the learners are stimulated and the right methods are used, you're more likely to achieve your goals. The 4th stage is, of course, the evaluation and moderation. Once we've implemented, we now want to evaluate and moderate how we've done. Now, let's look at evaluation and moderation separately. Evaluating is looking at how did we achieve our final result, or did we achieve the result that we were looking for. We need to make sure that the result that we've got is accurate, reliable, and that the methods and processes that we used were actually appropriate to the goal we set. Now, in order to ensure that they were accurate and they were appropriate, we need to carry out a moderation process. Now, this we find in schools is often done incorrectly and not appropriately. Moderation should not just happen at the end. That's verification. Moderation should be an ongoing process, checking the entire process as you go along. So what you want to make sure is the process was checked before the actual assessments were given to the learners. And as we said, you need to assess the final result. Make sure that the final result is actually accurate. From number 4, and this is where most schools stop. They don't carry on from here. They stop when they've done the evaluation and moderation, and that's it. There are 2 really important steps that often get left out. Step number 5 is the reporting. Now, you'll probably say, but we do report at school. We give out reports to the learners. That is not the reporting we're looking at here. The reporting here is we're looking at our original goal that we set, and we want to compare the current results with the original goal. So in other words, did we achieve the results we actually set out to achieve? What are the differences? What haven't we achieved? Why are they different? What made them different? Now, of course, in answering all these questions, we need to do something with this information. So once we have reported on how we did compared to our original goal, the next stage, and probably the most important stage, is our reflection stage. So after reporting, we then need to reflect. And we often ask teachers, did you reflect on your lessons? Schools, we ask them whether they've reflected on what they've done and how it's worked. But we really need to use something to reflect on. So we need to use the information we found in reporting and establish what we can now do differently. So what processes in this whole curriculum cycle, what planning do we need to do differently? What implementation, what evaluation and moderation can we do differently in order to achieve a better goal? We might even look back and say, you know what, the goal that we set, we didn't achieve at all. Maybe we must change the goal. Maybe we must change the way we do things. But the reflection is important. And if you don't have change from one goal or one process or cycle to the next, then you're not reflecting properly. So often this is done on an annual basis. So schools will reflect, they'll set their goals, they'll go through the year, and at the end of the year, they will look back and say, right, what goals do we need to change? So it's important that we look at this very carefully and make sure that we do each of these stages. What is very interesting to note is what makes one school more successful than another is often the reporting and reflection stage. Now, we said earlier that this is a cycle, and you'll notice that although we've got 1 to 6, there are no arrows. Now, we're going to discuss the arrows and the in-between bits, because although these 6 elements are really important, what's even more important is the link between each of these. So if we have a look at the first link, the link between the goal and focus. So once we've set up a goal, now let's use the goal of literacy. We want to improve literacy in the school. Let's use this as our example. We can't just set up the goal that we want to improve literacy and then start planning. There has to be a link between the two. So we've got to use those goals, the improvement of literacy in our planning. So what you want to see is throughout the school, everything we plan for, the intention of improving literacy needs to be visible in that planning. Now, once we've planned, the link between planning and implementation is so important. Many of you will know, or maybe you can relate to yourselves, these teachers with fantastic planning folders and planning files. Everything's in it. It's neat, but yet nothing happens in the classroom. On the flip side of that, you often get teachers that their planning is terrible in terms of their teacher's folder. If you ask them for a teacher's file, they cannot produce a teacher's file. But put them in the classroom and they are incredible. Now this is the link between the planning and implementation we want to see. Planning does not necessarily mean writing things down. Planning is a process that you go through to decide what you're going to do. So we want to see that we actively use planning, and I've got documentation in there, but it's about the planning, not so much about the documentation. How do we use this to improve our implementation outcomes? So are we seeing that planning in the classroom? So in the case of literacy, are we actually seeing that the planning, the things we plan for to improve literacy, we're actually seeing it happen in the classroom? In the case of literacy, it might have been we want to do more comprehensions in the classroom. Are we seeing that happen? Then the next stage, or the next arrow, is the link between 3 and 4, between implementation and evaluation and moderation. This is a very, very important link. We need to make sure we're using ongoing observation assessment to change the way things are done. We cannot just do things in the classroom all the time and not reflect, or in the school, and not reflect on the final result. We also want to see that the processes we put in place in the classroom or in the teaching that actually reflects and goes through into the assessment. So if we want to improve literacy, and one of the goals and in the planning we put comprehensions, we want the learners to do more comprehensions. In the classroom, in the implementation, we will make sure that we're teaching using more implementation. But even more importantly, we want to see in the assessments and the evaluation that there were comprehensions of the correct level that the learners have now been going through. The evaluation and moderation link, number 4 to number 5. Are we analysing and discussing the results in terms of the original goals that were set? So often what we find in schools at the end of the year, the learners all get their results, they sit down, and what they look at is which learners are in jeopardy of failing and which learners are really doing well. we don't often look and really report on our goal. Our goal was to improve literacy. Do we see that improvement in literacy coming through in our evaluation and moderation? That's what we must report on. We don't want to just report on anything. And then, of course, the number 5 to number 6 is, are we making sure that the changes we're going to make in the school, we're using the information we've got from the reporting to make those changes, to make sure that there is actually that link. So often we do see that schools do report and reflect, but there's very seldom a link. And then, of course, the final stage is when you've decided what things must be changed and how they must be done differently. You want to see that now following through into the next set of goals that the school has put in place for the next cycle. It might be per term, it might be per year, it depends. This cycle is so effective, and what we've found is schools that carry out this cycle at the different levels really are successful in improving their results and really offering a top-class curriculum. In the next module, we're going to look at how does this curriculum cycle fit into the school context at the different levels. Before moving on to the next module, we'd like you to please do the assessment, the short assessment that you will find after this video clip, before moving on to the module 2.